Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Drone Out. We have, what number's this?
Than there have been BMFA magazines.
Which is worrying. How many years have they been going?
100.
Since the dawn of time. Right, tonight we are joined by Andrew / Frank.
Good evening.
Andy RC.
Hello.
My little Tony.
Hello.
Our guest for tonight, Zoe FPV.
Hey, everybody.
And I'm Jack, Bright Until I Fly. And you're listening to Let's Drone Out.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, apparently, tonight we're going to talk about X-Class.
Dun, dun, dun.
If Tony can stay connected long enough.
back.
Never leave me.
The X-Class pilot to talk about X-Class.
Yeah, I'm here. Kind of.
So the last time I was here, you had just been getting into it. And now you've flown your own rig, I think, in a race, right?
Not in a proper race yet. There it is
Well,
behind
a
me.
demo. Still,
I've
you've gotten it up in the air.
Yeah, we've done a demo at
Tony got it up.
done a demo at the mini air show, which is pretty cool. A couple of months ago. But since then, we've changed quite a few things. We were flying 6S, and it was just not working for us. It was too slow, and I was on full throttle pretty much all the time.
Yeah, but the 400 kV motors, you need 8S on them to get any kind of real speed. The funny thing with those 400 kV motors is that the whole concept of them is that you can't blow them up. Like you can try, but they're one of the most bulletproof motors out there that I've tested.
Yeah.
But that also means they're not as fast as a lot of the other bigger motors out there. But there's definitely been a risk once you start going up in size with the current ESCs that we have. You're gonna start seeing more fires. So like it's really hard to find a good balance between like speed and not catching fire.
We have not got anything warm yet.
That's good. That's good.
Bit
That's
of
the way it should be.
a
Oh,
Tony echo there.
Why is it echoing?
Who's not wearing headphones? Zoe? Headphones?
My shit shouldn't be echoing.
I
think it's okay.
I've turned myself down. Is that better?
It weren't you. I think it was Zoe.
Everyone just assumes it's Tony when there's a problem.
Oh, it is. It would
not.
look at him. It's him.
No. Tony hasn't got the bandwidth to mess it up today. So he couldn't get on his phone.
It's on my phone now. It's working.
And
Yeah, so we haven't got anything hot yet, but we have mapped out the track that you guys flew, the car track. We mapped that out with flags, and we were 2 seconds off the pace. But that was with dual blades, and we've got the new tri blades that you guys run now. So we've yet to test it again now. So we're hoping.
Yeah, those tri-blades have quickly become the de facto standard right now. Like, I see everyone using them. Even DR1s, like secret teams, I've seen little photos and snippets of are using them. And they make a big difference. Like, that whole prop was originally designed to have a load in the air and at speed. So it's meant to have not a static load on it, but like an active load as it's up in the air. Like a lot of people think props, like you just put them on a thrust stand and you get your data. That doesn't tell you like half the story. It tells you a good deal of static pressure tests, but it doesn't tell you how the prop's going to perform in the air when it's unloaded and it's at speed and it has airflow already going over it.
Yeah.
And realistically, that doesn't really matter until you get past 70 miles an hour. Like once you start getting past that point, that's when the aerodynamics really come into play. And especially once you get past like the 120 mark.
I'd like to do that.
You could very well get there with 8-cell on the 400 kV motors with the master air screw 13 by 12s. Yes, 13 by 12 by 8s. They will do close to 140. At least it should in theory, because like the 8-cell definitely helps out when you go that route. The thing you're going to definitely have to watch for is that the prop is really heavy for that motor. So like the acceleration time is going to be a little bit more. So if you try to like blip the throttle a lot, you're going to really start heating up the motor, and that's going to cause like you'll start warming stuff up soon.
Good. We need to warm up. We need to warm stuff up. But we're using the North Aero motors at the moment.
Okay.
So they're
And those are
KV.
what KV?
I can't remember what KV they are. What's going on with this chat today? Echoing everywhere. I can't remember. Is Martin in the chat? Yeah, I can find out for you, but I cannot remember what KV they are. But
why don't you just go over there and have a look?
because that's not it. The rig is at his.
What's with the echo, people?
Don't know.
Is that you, Zoe?
Is it me? I don't know. It could be a combination thereof, but like I've done podcasts before with this audio setup and I haven't had any issues.
It's intermittent, which is weird, isn't it? It's coming in and out. I'm not
Frank?
sure.
I've been muted, so weren't me.
Any ideas?
When it
I'm going to
happens,
mute myself. Everyone mute yourself when they don't talk.
we need to pay attention to the green thing
Yeah.
going up and down and see what's causing it.
I'll keep an eye out. Next time we hear something, then we
Dun dun dun.
But we've got to put a pod on ours, haven't we? Because apparently there's a pod now you've got to run.
This is the controversy. Dun dun dun. So part of the controversy. So let me like back up to the pod thing a little bit and like rewind time just a little bit back to when it was originally brought into existence. And for those that don't know the pod thing, X-Class is at one point in time, and I say this at one point in time, instituted a rule for you to have a canopy with a 5x8 surface area on it. And it was originally intended so you could put advertisement space on the side of your machine to attract sponsors. Like there was a whole theory behind it, and there's a really big reason for it. And I had spent originally back in season 4, I came out with my original canopy, which was basically a thong. It covered just the basic part of the aircraft, but it met the current, which is now the current 5x8 canopy standard. But at the time, I was told it was too small, so I made something bigger.
What is that made out of? What's that made out of?
This is TPU. So it's like flexible. It's actually really cool. This canopy has survived 3 crashes so far. So it's it took 100 hours to print.
Wow.
I want to say thank you, Old Gravy Leg, for spending the time to print this out, but it's still holding up to all the abuse that I put it through, which is pretty cool. And I hand sculpted this in virtual reality using a pair of Oculus touch controllers and a headset.
Whoa.
So this was like handmade in a weird way. So yeah, I spent a lot of time on the canopy design, and the canopy was basically made a requirement for the track races. And this is also because the track owners at the time said they needed to look bigger. They wanted them to appear bigger. And one of the ways you do that is by making a canopy. And so X-Class then spent time, like X-Class and me in the core group, there was like a good 5 or 6 of them that spent several weekends over a couple months developing out the current X-Class standard canopy. Although I've heard there's issues with that one because one, it's flat like a car body. So when you're up in the air, it's actually pushing against you and it makes the machines really slow.
Yeah.
But the other bigger issue is that they made it with traditional design materials, and this is just history. This is just stuff that I want to get out there in the world because I think it's neat and interesting, and no one's heard it before. They went the traditional route, so they had Katrina Knows Why sculpt a body for the canopy, so she made basically a mold for it. They poured silicone over it and made a silicone master, and then made a proper mold from that. And then they did a traditional Lexan casting using a body and whatnot to make their canopy. It looks interesting. I mean, it definitely has some sexy lines to it, but for a drone canopy, it's not as optimized as it could be. And one of the bigger issues is that the mold technique, it's delicate. Like you end up breaking the masters a lot.
Yeah.
So anyways, they spent a lot of time to have those canopies for machines so that there could be pilots that could go out in the field with those canopies and use them with the X-Class machines if they needed a machine. So everything was good and dandy up until the first track race when Colby and a few other pilots showed up. Ostrich Air too. If I'm gonna name names, I'm gonna name names. But a couple of the bigger teams showed up without canopies when it was a required rule, and each team was made very well aware that they needed to have a canopy. So almost on the spot, they changed the rule and said, okay, we get away with it for the first race, but the next race, canopy. And then somewhere between race 1 and 2, they made it so the body of the aircraft at any point in time, if it's 5 by 8 inches, meets the rule, which is stupid because they're 800 by 800 millimeters. You could argue that that's the body of the aircraft.
Yeah.
And that meets the spec. So it's almost like they threw, and this is by they, I mean Noah, the CEO of X-Class, threw out the canopy ruling. And essentially throughout hundreds and hundreds of hours of work that I put into it, not once, but twice. So I was a little peeved, to say the least. I was a little, especially because there were a lot of pilots that did put in the time to make a canopy.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've
Shane.
seen cars and stuff.
Yeah, dude, that thing was so cool. Shane actually took the time to put that together. And he almost made a DeLorean, like a flying DeLorean. I was like, that would have been too much.
88 miles an hour.
And then it just goes back in time. And the funny thing is we go up to those speeds routinely. But yeah, so like he spent time on it. John Gazer, he spent time on his canopy. And, several other pilots, like the X-Class crew, like all the pilots that were fielded had canopies. I had my canopy. And that's really where my, I guess, like, issue came from, because it wasn't just me that was slighted in some ways, it was other people. And then on top of that, I even have a judge, quote unquote, confirming that they had given pilots passes, not just for the first race, but for the second race and previous races. So there's
Tony's sorting out his sound for the moment. It was him, the echo.
I was going to say, my setup is
Have you got a cameraman, Zoe?
No, so this is a robot. It tries to track my face.
I don't think we can hear Tony at all now, can I just say? I can see his lips moving, but no sound coming out.
He's saying X-Class is stupid and it's big and
you have to do sign language, Tony.
Don't really want to know Tony's sign language, to be honest.
He's like, give a thumbs down on this video, please. But seriously, take a moment to like and subscribe to Let's Drone Out, because these guys are awesome. And
there's so many like Patreons in the chat. It's amazing.
Underfluked in the chat has been asking about where to get a frame in the UK. Just been saying that because Tony's been getting his frames through Fossil stuff, so they're developing that at the moment. But Fossils do like to tinker a lot, so I think the best thing is to just message them and be like, "Stop tinkering, start selling." My recommendation.
Yeah, seriously, like there's the only place that's selling X-Class frames, Dysonian.com, and we've been waiting for someone else to sell something just so we have competition on the market. It's like it's one thing to be alone standing in the field, but to have other people with you standing in the same field, you know, with the same vision, I think lends credence to the idea. And I think there's more than one way to build these things. And I'd really like to see more variation in the designs that are out there and what people can get their hands on.
Also got Falling with Stars, so that's Luke, I'm pretty sure, who's building his own at the moment. He's getting a custom top and bottom plate built. He was asking, do you have any recommendations of the sweet spot for X-Class sizes? I'm pretty sure I've seen a lot of people have been going on the 800 side.
Yeah, so the 800 millimeter is actually, there's history behind why it's not 1000 millimeter and why it's 800 to 1200. So at the first X-Class race, I showed up with an 800 millimeter rig, and Kevin Sellers had a 1200 millimeter rig, and we were like, well, that's about 1,000 if you combine the two, and that's kind of an open range for people to kind of innovate and build different types of machines. And so far we've seen that. Although there definitely has been a trend towards small. So a lot of people are building out the 800 millimeter spec frames. And again, and it's also why it goes back to the canopy. They're going as small as possible. And when you add a canopy, you add drag. So competing against people that don't have canopies is kind of meh.
Do you know what I would do is
take off my canopy?
No, if people don't show up with a canopy, you know, like biplanes with the flag with writing on the back of it, you should, you should have them and give them to people that don't have canopies, as it's drag, and it'll be like, I'm a moron, I can't read the rules.
Well, I kind of want to have, so with these X-Class races, for the track races, for people that don't know, is completely different than any kind of drone race you've ever been to, because it's exactly like an old school automotive track race. So the car divisions, they have different divisions of cars that come out onto the track. And as one car division comes on and does their 20-lap race or whatever, they drive off the track, and then the next division comes in and does their race. Well, X-Class has their own division within that, so we come out and do our own race, and then cars come out and do their own race. So we are actually running the same basic kind of rules the cars are running. We're running the same track, and we have the same audience, and we're incorporated into the same racing structure of their typical race nights. So it's open track racing. It's much more head-to-head. And I will say there's something for head-to-head racing when you have 4 people grouped up and they're trying to fight for position. Like, that is really intense, especially when you have these giant machines traveling at 100 miles an hour and they're really pushing the limit. I mean, at every race we've had multiple crashes, and it's been kind of a spectacle. And that's without having obstacles. We've had crashes just by pilots pushing the limits of their machines to get around the track as fast as possible to compete. And that's kind of cool in its own way. And changes the dynamics of drone racing. During the whole time, you can look anywhere and know exactly where every machine is on the track as a spectator. And that's something that's really missing with drone racing, at least traditionally.
Is your canopy helping or hindering you, do you think, at the moment?
So it's a bit of both. So in the straightaways, I think it hinders me a little bit because it adds to that drag. In the turns, I actually think it does help me a bit. I've noticed in reviewing the footage, I'm able to take the turns tighter than anybody else. And part of that, I believe, is due to the fact that the canopy design actually does work. Like, as I go into the turn, I push this thing sideways, and I angle it in a way where it actually pushes the craft down and into the turn. and actually reduces the amount of, and I have black box logs on this, that reduces the amount that the craft has to yaw. So instead of yawing, the machine's relying on this to hold the position of the yaw, and the machine lets up off the motors for the yaw and actually allows them to go a little bit more throttle, and gives you more top end. So in the turns, great. Coming out of the turns, going the straightaways, it definitely adds a bit of drag to that and definitely hinders me from passing and doing passing maneuvers. So it's, I mean, it's the most minimalistic way I could do it. I mean, going straight on.
Yeah.
This does not add too much, but it definitely still adds more than any other machine currently out there. And that, it bothers me. It more or less bothers me. Well, not any other machine out there. I should say any other machine that has a complete custom canopy. Like Shane's canopy is more or less off the shelf. The X-Class canopy for those pilots is off the shelf. This one is bigger than it needs to be, which is sad because at the beginning of the season, I was told this needs to be bigger. So midway through the season, I'm told it could be smaller, and now I'm like, meh. So a lot of the facts that they haven't had the rules completely in place, haven't been enforcing the rules completely yet, for the sake of the show and the fact that it's so young and they're still fleshing everything out, I sort of understand that. But at the same time, I'm a freaking competitor and I love to compete. And since my first drone race, all I've wanted was a fair racing competition going forward, so it'd be fun to compete in. But you know, the history has shown that drone racing has been a bit of a boondoggle at times, and it's been hard to get it running smoothly and enjoyable enough for the pilots and the spectators alike. But I still hold out hope because I believe the format for giant drone racing will evolve. The format for mini quad racing is evolving. I've noticed that there's a general trend towards team racing now, which is really cool to see. I believe team racing is going to really kind of push the drama and the interaction aspect of racing forward. Now you pair that with giant drones, and then you pair that with pit crews and the ability for these machines to pit, so you have the action continuously happening and not just happening for 2 minutes at a time, then you have a real sport. But until we get to that point, everything, in my opinion, is just for show. And I need to chill out because, yeah, it's. I take it really seriously at times.
That sounds really interesting. The pit thing. So you land, swap battery, go again. That could really switch things up. You know, I like that idea. I missed that from Formula One actually. Even they do the whole race now on one thing.
See, the biggest detriment to mini quad or drone racing in general has been the fact that they took the basic idea from the first race, the obstacle course, and they're like, this is a drone race. And since then, they have expanded on that idea, but they have not they've not let it evolve past that. And so we've been kind of selling what I call drone racing version 0.1.
Yeah, because the races last like 2 minutes, if that, right?
And if you're lucky if the downtime between races is 2 minutes. I mean, on a good multi-GP race, you're lucky if that gets down to about 2 minutes. And most pilots are happy if the downtime is less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, but then you see, we had Western Park this year, and it's a funny event because it's an FPV event that runs alongside a huge line of sight, large model show, like massive, 20-foot wingspan RC line of sight stuff. And there was probably 10 to 15,000 people watching the big scale aircraft. And then the FPV side was just one bloke in a foldable chair, and it was so sad. And I said to Andy, how this needs changing, surely.
There's a weird thing. So if you go to South Korea, there's been crowds at a lot of drone races. Like South Korean audience eats it up. It is because like they've eaten up pro gaming and esports, and that's become a big thing over there. And for them, drone racing is almost a natural extension of that, and it's kind of allowed it to grow. In America, esports is only now starting to kind of get its traction, and that's really even hard to say because it's, I mean, it's big, but it's not as big as it could be. And it's starting to overpass some real sports, and it's starting to almost, you know, shoulder to shoulder with some of the bigger ones like golf, basketball, and even baseball. But it's not that everyday pastime really yet. And the same thing with drone racing is like, we've only been drone racing for a few years. Like it took gaming 30 years. Like it took gaming, you know, like way longer, 3 times as long before it started to become any kind of real.
It is so new, isn't it? All this.
I mean, look, if you look at any sport going back into the first couple years of it, it's an absolute fucking mess. Like it's absolutely true. Like there's skeletons in every sports closet. Like it is absolutely true. And that's kind of, I kind of want to say that in the sense that every drone league I've been in has had their own skeletons and issues. And a lot of the drone leagues I've heard of have had their own issues as well. And that's even going back from Dubai, Drone Nationals, Drone Worlds. Even some of the ESL events I've been a part of had their own issues. And X-Class, I mean, especially X-Class, because it's new and it's pushing a new kind of boundary and a whole new, not just a boundary, but boundaries. The fact that we're doing this in a stadium full of people with giant drones, meanwhile others aren't even able to do it with mini quads, that's a big deal. Like that's something that a lot of people haven't really soaked in yet. So, you know, for the shortcomings I see within the rules, and in some ways competitors following them, and in a lot of ways, not the competitors' fault, but the organization for not enforcing them. And I want to make that very clear. My issue is not with any of the competitors. Like I love Colby dearly. I love Ostrich Air. I love all those guys a lot. My issue is with the fact that essentially they were given passes by the organization, and because of that now we have the discrepancy on the canopies. People are like, do I need one, do I not need one? And it's caused issues like that. So that's where my issue is with the X-Class organization. It's with the fact that me personally, and I sadly consider myself an athlete when I compete and an artist when I'm flying freestyle. When I'm an athlete, I give a shit about the rules. Like I want to follow the rules to a T and compete to the best of my abilities. And I really expect everyone else to do the same. That's what creates a level playing field. And that's what, in my opinion, makes it fun. When that doesn't happen, it kills the joy for me as a competitor. And it's something that I really love. Like it's not that so much I love winning, but I love competing and even failing, but still showing that I've got something, but still I love a fair competition. And that's something I've only really found a love and a need of when I got into drone racing. Before drone racing, I played video games, and that was the most amount of competition I had in my life. And since getting into that, getting into drones, I've craved a proper competition and potentially be able to have a career as a pilot, both as a competitor and as an artist. And I've just been let down a lot as a competitor. And I know I'm not alone. Like you've seen a large turnover of drone racing pilots within just the last year. And it's something that
in the X-Class or in general?
In general. In X-Class, we've seen a growth. I don't think, especially the last few months, X-Class has just really gotten popular, especially since it sounds like DR1 is going to be doing something with giant drones. And I say that because I'm not a part of it, wish I was, and have only seen murmurs about them doing something right now. And I'm like, where the heck am I? So it's like, but that being said, it still adds fuel to the fire of X-Class going forward because it legitimizes giant drone racing. And this goes back in the history. I had a meeting with DR1 over 2 years ago about giant drone racing. I had a meeting with the CEO, Brad Fox-Avon, about the possibility of implementing a meter-sized drone with the ability to go 100 plus miles an hour to really be exciting. And I told them I could do that, and I was going to, do that. And then they uninvited me, and they pulled that from the table. Well, I kind of carried on with that vision. I'm like, this is obviously what people want. They want to see bigger, cooler, more fast drones. The format is broken, and it needs to change. At least it needs to change if we want it to be a spectator sport, and we want it to have sponsors with interest in actually shelling out money for pilots and people to compete. And I say that more as as something proper, because right now, like DR1, it's a marketing play. Like, they have a lot of backing by PepsiCo and their associated brands, but they're owned by that. So it's basically PepsiCo's idea of taking advantage of the drone racing hype and selling ads. DRL is trying to go about it more like an actual league, but in a lot of ways they turned it into a TV show, and now they're trying to actually legitimize their league, which I see is kind of cool. Even though I've probably been their biggest critic, which for fair reasons, even though people criticize me for it. I mean, some of it is justly due. It was a very inflammatory image. But the thing is, the leagues are still like that. Like, if you look at the issues I brought up months ago, there's still problems today in the drone industry. And I've seen attempts to fix a lot of the issues that I brought up, but it hasn't really happened yet. So I still hold out hope that my initial, what I talked about months ago will come back to help the industry out, and more female
you've got
pilots.
Pretty far in the US with the X class, and that you've got the actual racing going, and it's building up as a thing. You've obviously got your teething issues with the rules and exactly getting the details right, but it's well on the way. In the UK, we've got Tony in a field dicking around.
Well, see, that's the thing. So not to disparage that, but that's the thing. X Class started its own chapter program, and the UK chapter with Tony was the first one.
Yep.
And the idea with that was to encourage more people to race, because it only takes 2 people to race, and it's a lot of fun just racing with 2 people with these giant machines.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of people in the chat asking about details about power trains and all that sort of thing, and I'm pretty sure there's a good list somewhere that you probably know the details of more than I do.
Yeah, so xclass.racing has a list of some of the stuff out there. Like, they just updated it recently, and it's on the top of the website. So you just go xclass.racing, and you'll see rules and regulations and the whole shebang of stuff and information.
Page on the build list is got here.
And if you want to see what I'm flying and know what I'm flying, go to Dysonian.com. I have build lists for everything there. It's like the California Vixen with 666 kV motors, the Master Air Screw 13 by 12 by 8 props, the 80 amp ESCs, and a 6000 mAh 75C battery. That's currently the fastest recorded drone in X Class, and that currently has the track time at Antioch.
What size battery are you running?
6000 mAh 75C. And it's too small.
Milliamp. What 6S, 5S, 8S?
All the S. 6S. So I call it the deal with the devil on this one. So it's 666 kV motors running 6 cell on a 6000 mAh battery.
Right.
And it hauls ass.
Why was our 6S so slow? I mean, we were only running.
So one of the biggest issues right now is batteries. Like, we have a lack of really good high C rating batteries at the size. Like the mini quad market, and this is what happened, is like the mini quad market happened, the industrial market happened here. The mini quad market took the battery technology up and up and up and up and up and up and up, and the industrial market stayed the same. And my tracking on my camera sucks.
We can see
Did it follow your
Pikachu.
hands?
I was trying to track my face, and I was trying to make gestures with my hands, and it confused it. So,
The hell is that thing? Has it got a name? Is it the little thing that you had on the front of your canopy with the little sticky up arms? What happened to that, man? That was amazing.
that was a Photoshop.
Was it? Damn it.
Yeah, because when I saw, there's antennas that stick up, and in my head, I thought it just looked like someone going wee. So I photoshopped the little hands onto it.
Oh,
Yeah, I might have to actually add those.
damn it. I'm like Tony. I feel like I've just found out the Earth's round now. I'm really disappointed.
You are woke, Jack.
Oh, no.
Well,
So no, the Earth is flat. Find out next week on the second episode of Quad Bashers while we test whether or not the Earth is round.
Oh, man.
You've been flying high speed into things, Zoe.
Yep.
And then watching it slowly back.
Yep. It's so fun.
Is your battery still the same questionable shape?
What do you mean?
Well, last time you were on, you had a funny shaped battery.
Oh yeah, no.
When we had girls' night.
Yeah,
I've
your
got
battery
rid of the
looked like a
cone.
dildo. Is your battery still? Are you still trying to summon Satan with 666 and a giant dildo?
No. I wrote the contract with the dildo battery, and we're good now. So the 666 kV contract, and then I handed Satan the dildo, and he's like, "I'm going to use this on you later."
If you ever get a new cat, can you name it Satan? I think it's a really good name.
I tell you what, a 6S dildo, now that's going to be some power, isn't it?
I'd love to see Andy review that.
Tell you what, man, the way things are going, that might be my next avenue, I tell you.
I don't know how much, because, okay, so I hadn't signed the NDA when I found it out. But there's a certain motor company that's working on a 6S dildo.
Shut up. Probably
let's just say the sexual wellness market is way bigger than the FPV market, and they're realizing their technology could be used for way more than drones.
I can just see the slogan, ripping bulls.
Okay,
this podcast always goes somewhere, doesn't it?
I was going to bring it back a bit. So there was, I know. Sorry, there was some questions in the chat earlier about how big a space do you actually need to fly these things?
So this is debatable. It depends on how good of a pilot you are.
Bearing in mind that we're talking about all these guys in the chat that are like, I want to build one and then try it out.
So if you're talking about space, like a football field, football fields are pretty good space for it. That's about the general size of regular track and field. Like if you have a track and field by your house, like a high school or something, you can go there during like an off time and actually do timing. So the really cool thing with the track and field is that their tracks are defined by length, and you can use Google Earth and actually plot out your camera footage versus the time it takes you to go around a track, and plot out how fast your average speed is on your drone. And currently, that is the most reliable way of telling you how fast a machine is. And it's currently the way the Guinness Book of World Records counts drone speed. So if you're trying to count your speed and get some testing data in, I recommend using that method.
What method was that, Zoe? Sorry, I missed that. What method do they use for the speed?
So it's essentially measuring time over distance, or distance over time.
Speed distance over time.
So it'd be average speed rather than actual top speed.
Yes, because so far, like every measurement method that they've tried for the top speed, like the absolute top speed, like radar and stuff like that, has been fairly inconsistent. And the most reliable method of gaining time or recording time is between 2 points of space. So essentially, machine starts here, ends there. And that's the time it takes to go between those 2 points. is how you get the average speed of the machine.
Yeah, I think what can happen with the bigger models is maybe it can pick up the props, like deflections from the props and stuff. Because I do speed testing with radar, and yeah, it can be off by quite a bit sometimes.
Well, that's the thing. At some points in time, the prop is as wide as the arm on my machine.
Yeah.
And it's almost as thick when you combine the aluminum and stuff and like its actual radar.
We don't know what that is in this country.
What is?
Aluminum.
Oh.
Aluminum.
Sorry.
I'm sorry that you're using the carbon fiber still. You
Actually,
don't.
we've just changed.
Are you using the HDPE?
No.
Damn it!
That's not gonna make a good dildo.
So you're using aluminium. You've coming to the dark side.
We have to, because it's cheaper.
Because it's cheaper.
Basically.
Okay. I see how it is. I see how it is.
How many?
Me and Frank are going to be using a potato.
No, it's just funny. It's just like Dysonian.com, like Dyson and me, we set the trend for aluminum frames. We're like, people, carbon fiber stupid, expensive, break easy. Yeah. Aluminum cheap, holds shape, easy to repair. I mean, I've yet to break one of my aluminum frames, and that's kind of saying something for crashing these things at 100 miles an hour.
Our frames are still carbon, but we've just swapped to using aluminium arms because they're they're £2 a go instead of whatever they were 10 quid a go or something. So you can just replace an arm in.
Yeah, RC Dude has a point.
You can replace it in like 2 minutes.
And it's also, it allows you to pick the breaking point. You know, like if you don't pick the point that breaks on these machines, it's going to pick it for you. And with aluminum arms, you have the ability to, and a lot of crashes, if it doesn't break, bend it back into place and keep flying, which you can't really do with carbon. So it's definitely, like, I know Armaton, they're going aluminum. And it's funny that it's taking giant racing drones back to basically old school aircraft building techniques, which is aluminum construction using aluminum grade aircraft materials. So yeah, we're going back in time a little bit with these giant rigs.
What about aluminium for 5-inch? Or is the power to weight ratio, you know, is it too much for 5-inch? So I've always wondered that. We'll just use carbon fiber.
So there's been a few frames out there that have been full or aluminum, and in general, the milling on them is not enough to make them light enough to be competitive with the carbon fiber frames.
Right.
And one of the bigger issues with these giant X-Class machines is that the flat pack carbon fiber frame works for a mini quad. But once you get to the larger machines, you start having arms. You can't have a flat packed arm for an X-Class quad. And if you do, it's going to be massive and really heavy and like just unwieldy. So a lot of people are using adapters on the motors and the frame to hold an arm of some kind, whether it be an aluminum tube, a hexagonal shape tube, or whatever have you, hold the arm in place. And what that ends up doing is it creates a lot of extra hardware that's required to hold it in place. And that adds expense to manufacturing, it adds time for building, adds complexity, adds failure points. That's a really big thing, especially out on the arms. It adds really big failure points. So going with like the Dysonian design where we've flat packed the end of the tubes, and we've created a way to kind of reinforce the strength of the tube so it's not just smushed flat. Even allows you to run the wiring inside the arms, which is kind of nice too, which is like we have a really clean wiring setup that's coming out soon. And then on top of that, the aluminum frame, like the one Dysonian's working on and should be out hopefully next week, is $99. Like you pay $99 and $20 shipping, and we send you all the aluminum, the custom-made welded hub for it with the 1-bolt removal. So the arms pop off with 1 bolt, which makes them really easy to travel with. And and you print out your own parts. So you can print out without motor pads. You could go bare. You could just print out the little pod. Hell, you could even buy some of the parts separately and just buy what you need. Say you wanted to hand build some parts or just use the base frame for another configuration. For example, there's one pilot, Critter. He's bought the sole frame, and he's basically made a slam deck mount version of it where the battery's on top. He's made a couple different variations. And that's another big thing of note is the Dysonian frames. We're planning on supporting that frame architecture, like the base frames, going forward for years. So like when we release a new product, it's going to be based off of the existing frame designs. So if you have one of our frames, you'll be able to basically bolt on a new configuration or new arms for new motors and essentially go. So the same frame, and much like old school automotive production, will be able to go through several generations of use before we discontinue it. And I don't think we will. I think the aluminum frame is here to stay, and the full aluminum build from Dysonian is going to be a staple of ours. We're working on a new, this is kind of babbling, we're working on a new configuration of it, and I don't know how much I want to reveal because it's going to be unlike anything anyone's ever seen before. And I'm kind of worried about others getting to the design of it before we get it out. And there's a very large chance that we'll never sell the design that we're working on next, as it's a concept design and it's trying to prove a point. We're completely rethinking the idea of what an X-Class drone is and should be and look like. So
it's going to be a 5-inch, isn't it? I'm kidding.
Yes.
Let's just say X-Class gives you wings.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Like, you know, when you see like for F1, and you know, we could be doing perhaps things with downforce and stuff like that. And I always thought, like, you know, about braking with the motors and stuff, maybe more stuff with that when it comes to corners. I think there's a lot to be explored. So that's what I thought when you went down those lines. Yeah, like wings and stuff, and downforce, maybe adjustable things.
We've got a roadmap ahead to push ahead hybrid designs, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. Like, and it's also something that we might be scaling up to 1600 millimeters. So
you'll be able to sit in it at some point.
Well, so there's a 1600 millimeters is the size of a car. Like if you put the motors where they should be, they're essentially where the wheels would be on a small car. So at that point in time, you're dealing with a machine that you could almost say rivals that of traditional automotive racing, and creates a spectacle that is something to behold. So I'm hoping that project will materialize sooner than later. There's two different projects within that. There's the 1600 millimeter project, and then there's the hybrid project. And the idea behind that is that it's essentially one's a scaled up version of the other. So we're proving the hybrid concept on the 800 millimeter range. And once that concept is proven, we're going to be moving on to basically proving technologies within the 1600 millimeter range. And I have some hopes and theories for that. It's so hard to talk about because some of these bigger projects are a bit slower moving. And realistically, there's not a lot of money in it, and I'm not doing it for any kind of money, so there's really no reason I should be secretive. But there's a couple companies that I've been working with, IQ Motion Control and Freedom Motors. And Freedom Motors makes a basically the next best thing to an electric motor and a gas motor, which is a Wankel rotary engine variation, which essentially has two moving parts instead of one moving part that our electric motors have. and it has the ability to change its RPM within half a second, within 20% of its range. So it can rev up very quickly and rev down very quickly, a lot like our electric motors. So
engine.
I know it sounds funny, but Dr. Wankel is the guy that invented this engine, and there's some interesting history behind it. But
would that be on every single arm, or would it be one motor that drives belts?
No.
Also, it would be on every single arm, because that would be a new thing as well, wouldn't it? Because a lot of the gas-powered quadcopters, if you will, have been sort of belt driven up to now, from what I've seen. So that's an interesting idea.
Trouble is with the Wankel engine is the little seals wear out, and also they're not that.
Well, this is the biggest thing with the seals. The
Eco.
seals only wear out when you're not running the engine at efficiency. So there's a big secret to the Wankel engine that a lot of people don't realize, is that they tend to leak when they're not running. So they'll leak oil when they're not in use. But once it's in use, the machine essentially creates like an equilibrium within itself, and the seals are functional. So if you keep it running continuously, it actually stays sealed and it doesn't wear down the seals. The biggest issue with the Wankel engine is that a lot of people just kind of forgot about it, and it hasn't really been proven against other technologies. Like a lot of the projects that were incorporating the versions of the engine, especially even going back to DARPA projects, that the current designer of the engine I'm talking about is, gosh, I keep forgetting his name. Dr. Paul Muller. So Dr. Muller has a version of this Wankel engine that he's potentially giving me access to for demonstration craft. And the biggest thing is changing essentially our flight controller systems, which in theory it's possible to use a high-speed servo system instead of regular signals. So the ESCs will be PWM using signals instead, operating a high-speed servo, changing the rate of the engine. And the biggest issue with that is you can't get the same kind of update rates on those engines as you can electric motors. So it's effectively harder to tune, but not impossible. It means you have to relax the PIDs and not update it as fast. Essentially, you're just like changing the way it updates and slowing down the updates to the motors and what it expects back from it. Then there's a secondary option I'm looking at with IQ motion control using electric motors and using the highest tech electric motors out there right now to make a giant racing drone. And they've got the motors under manufacture for electric surfboards, but the same motor can be used in other applications as well. That's a 5 kilowatt motor, so it's potentially a 20 kilowatt machine at 1600 millimeters, which is not unheard of, but it's definitely going to be beefy. So those projects are kind of my long-term whales right now. Like we have the frame, we have that's fine. It's mainly down to the power system. And while we could strap our current motors and props onto a 1600 millimeter frame, it just wouldn't do it justice. So it's kind of a wait for the right motors and whatnot. And once they get here, it's going to be a mad dash to actually build the machines. So that's my long-term projects right now with X-Class. Because 800 millimeters is cool, but I still think it needs to be bigger.
Wow, bigger than that. I've got to do a shout out to Squeechy FPV, Squeelchy. I don't know. Hello, mate.
Is it Squishy?
Yeah, that's him. Squishy. Hello, mate. There's your shout out. How many more X-Class races is there in the calendar in the US? And can me and Martin from Fossil Stuff come over and fly one?
Yes and yes. I think there's 6 more planned this year, or 5 more planned, depending if they reschedule one of the races that got canceled.
That was the rain, wasn't it, or tornado or something?
No, actually, it was, I believe, from the fact that we actually lost our flying field. So a local airport shut down flying drones at a spot that we were going to hold it at. Which goes to the fact that a lot of places in the United States have started adding regulations to where you can fly your drones at, and it's becoming harder and harder to fly in the US.
Do I have to take a test if I come over to fly?
Yes.
Yeah, and you have a registered address.
What kind of test is it? I hated tests at school.
Is it an IQ test?
Oh, that's a fail.
Tony can't even spell IQ.
So the Part 107 test is like 80% of what you'd have to get and take for your written on a private license for full-scale aircraft. Like,
Oh,
you need to know how to read like aeronautical maps really well and know exactly what all that shit means. And you can cram it into your head in 48 hours and get through the test like a lot of people do, but
mine leaks very badly.
that's why you cram for 48 hours. Like, I actually created a study guide to help me cram for the test.
It sounds like none of that would be useful to actually fly.
It's not. No, like literally maybe 10%, maybe 20% of the test actually relates to drones. Most of it's relating to general aeronautical knowledge. And that's why I say most of it, like, it wouldn't be much of a stretch for me to actually go for my full-scale pilot's license at this point in time. Like, I wouldn't have to study too much more on the written side of things. I would just have to get a lot of stick time in a plane and pass another written test that's a lot like the one I just passed.
Is that something you're interested in?
I'm too tall. I get so claustrophobic on planes, and most of the starter planes are really tiny. So
they are claustrophobic. It's true. Yeah.
So you wouldn't go in Peter Streetfold's little ultralight then?
An ultralight, maybe. Like, if there's no canopy and if we're like out in the world, I think I'd be okay.
Because someone was suggesting earlier that you take the motors that he's got on his ultralights and stick them on an X class.
That'd work.
Beefy. Hell of a motor.
That's kind of the direction we're going. I really think that's the direction drone racing is going. I think that's one of the reasons why Dysonian in general is kind of why we're moving towards more hybrid designs, is that we're playing the long game, and we know that designs are going to evolve, and once people are shown a better way, they'll catch on to it. Oh, Jack's got something.
Are you sure you guys would want to ride Peter's plane? Because like you two were like loving aluminium. Have you seen his landing gear in his last video?
No.
Really, does it? It's made of aluminium. It folded in.
It just folded over, didn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, I should have brought this up to you earlier. Do you mind erasing the, raggy thing on the board? It's triggering Tony.
I'm totally cool with that now. I'm over it.
What was that? There's some insider joke going on here.
Anyway, now we started talking.
Fine.
Hey, Andy RC. Oi, you're northern.
So I just gotta say there is a little bit of a sore spot for me in the raggy thing now too.
Explain. I want to know what's going on.
Come to the light side.
Wait a minute.
No, just to get it off my chest. So I spent 2 months helping out on the Raggy WBX for Rotor Riot.
Is this a Raggy?
Boy, Andy RC, that's total needs to be burnt.
Jack built this one, if that makes it worse.
I was forced to.
But like,
So
I worked on the variation. Let me grab it.
I don't know. Actually, I don't think I did.
I think this wound needs to be opened up.
No, not again. This has been so many times.
What's wrong with Raggy?
Oh, Andy, me and you need a chat.
There's fun backstory between Raggy and Fossil Stuffs, but let me tell you my history with them at least. Thomas came to me a while ago and it's like, hey Zoe, I got this frame. I want you to, have it. And he just sent me a bunch of stuff to review and some parts to build it out. And I built one out. I loved it. I loved the way it just went together. And initially, compared to the fossil stuffs, I liked that more. But that was kind of my initial thing. So I just kind of started flying my Raggy more. And eventually the Rotorite guys were like, hey, Zoe. Well, not Rotorite, but it was Ashley Thomas from Raggy. He's like, hey, Rotorite's interested in one of my frames. And can I get some help testing it out and working on it? And so I spent a lot of time. I had my own frame in development that I put on hold to help this out because
was that the episode where they crashed it into Chad's the play area?
Yeah, that was around the time when I initially met Thomas. And it was actually before that when I got my first Raggy frame. This is like stemming back from the initial interaction from Drone Nationals 2015. Like there's long history of interaction between them, or between Thomas and I. So anyways, I'm working on the frame. It's coming out well. I like it. And I'm getting no kickbacks at all for it. So I spent 2 months on not my own frame to receive nothing for it. And I get no real credit at all on anything I helped with. I went through piece by piece, actually building the frame and making sure like where holes needed to be cut out for people, that those places were properly set up. And this is where the real hurt comes in. Like I'm fine with helping on development and stuff on things just because I love being a test subject. Like I love testing stuff. Like that's one of my most favorite things in the world, is just making something new that hasn't been made before and making it a reality. Like that is the thing that gets me off more than any other thing.
You've got a fetish for being a guinea pig.
Yes.
I think we all have, Jack. Otherwise, we would not be on this show.
Yeah, I'm the mad scientist.
But the biggest issue, I mean, pending all of the issues I had with it, was that in the final production of the frame, they screwed up some of the pieces, and some of them were not correct. So, like, one of my fans was shipped out a frame that I helped them put together, only to find out that they put the holes on the wrong piece, and you couldn't physically put it together. So I had to take my soldering iron and like cut out the little structures that it needed for the wires to run through.
That's rough.
And I'm thinking to myself, here I am. I basically sold this person a frame. They bought it because they saw it from me. I didn't get paid for it. And here I am dealing with the production issues because they couldn't spend 5 fucking minutes to check to make sure the piece was fucking done right.
That's Raggy for you.
It pissed me the fuck off. And it still pisses me the fuck off because I've been about a week and a half, 2 weeks without a word on what is going on with production issues.
Good old Raggy, eh?
Sorry. Okay, I feel better now.
You don't get that with fossil stuff, you know. And were we first? Oh yes, we were first. Yeah. Okay.
That's the thing, is like I love Raggy. I love Thomas. Like Thomas has been a good friend to me. But when I am essentially working for you for free and you're screwing up and it's making me look bad in front of one of my fans, that becomes that's a bit of a problem, and that's a problem.
Are you continuing to work with them to sort of try work through it, or is this something that happened a while ago? And
this happened like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago.
Oh right, okay.
So this is fairly recent, and it's not. I haven't it's not like I called off all working relationship with them or anything. It's just like I told them what the fuck. I was like, this is not cool. This is the opposite of cool.
Did you have all the screws? Because the amount of Raggy frames that I've come into contact that didn't have all the
I won't comment on that either.
Mikey Dread says
it's not hard.
Listen, Mikey Dread says that's what you get for working with cloners. Well done, Dread.
Right.
Love it.
Right, we got to wrap up.
Oh, that's a shame.
I know.
Just getting juicy. I think the Raggy frames are. I mean, I threw that one, Jack, and it's like a brick. You know, it will not break. What's Tony doing? He's flashing something on the screen. It looked like a magazine.
Popping hot.
Yeah, this is the magazine that I'm in the UK. And it's also all about Frank's MS4. So it's not just me in there.
Well done, Frank.
I got my copy as well.
There's lots of stuff in there.
Where can you get it from? Because I haven't actually seen
See,
it
the
yet.
media likes the giant drones. They want more of it.
I did.
I've subscribed to it, so you get it like monthly. But it's in everywhere. There's a corner shop that's got it. You're famous, Tony.
Me.
Everywhere sells drones, so yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, Andy RC, you're northern.
Apparently.
Yeah. What is the word fettled?
Oh my god. I don't know. Is this an Urban Dictionary word?
No.
I've never heard of it before.
Fettled.
Fettled?
It says trim or clean the rough edges of a metal casting or a piece of pottery.
See, they never fettled the frames either then, because there's a bunch of rough edges on the milling that I was like, the fuck? They didn't even take the roughness off of it.
So what's the difference between fettle and chamfer? Is it the material that it's been fettled or chamfered?
Fettle's more rough, isn't it? A chamfer, you
Yeah.
have a very specific.
See, if they
like-
chamfered it, I would have been okay, but it was fettled. I'm adding that shit to my dictionary because that was legitimately fettled.
Chamfer means to put another edge to take an edge off.
Yeah.
Which you want chamfered edges on your carbon fiber frames. It helps protect the carbon from chipping when you crash, and in general makes it a little bit lighter.
Is that a northern term, no, Jack? It just looks like a term to me.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's apparently northern.
Shall we have a look? Oh, right underneath the actual explanation, there's an Urban Dictionary explanation.
What's that one say?
Shall I read that one out?
Yeah,
Go
on. Zoe's already said the F word about 8 times.
Oh, no. It says to modify, alter, change up, or touch up something.
Wait, did I drop the F-bomb tonight?
Yeah.
Yes.
Raggy. You went in some sort of raggy F.
God damn it!
Raggy F rage.
You got to an hour though. You done really
hard
well.
tonight not to drop the F-bomb, but I guess it
You
struck
said
a
fuck
note
a lot.
within me.
Hell of a lot.
I thought it was fettle.
No.
It says here to puke from drinking too much. Other drugs may be involved, but it's strictly alcohol based. To fettle, like throw up or something.
Lovely.
There's a funny term where there's mark. Full phrase, where there's mark, there's brass. Which I quite like.
None of these are northern terms.
Apparently so, on a website called the Joe.co.uk. There you go.
We
Posted it.
definitely trust them.
Yeah.
That's good
On this
enough.
note, do you want to tie us up then, Jack?
Yep. Thank you. You've been listening to another episode that's very echoey for some reason. Is it you, Si?
I think it's a little bit of me.
Oh dear. You've been listening to Let's Drone Out. We've been joined by Andrew / Frank,
Goodbye.
Andy RC,
Good night, everyone.
my little Tony,
Bonjour.
Zoe FPV.
Hey everybody, go check out my channel for quad bashers and watch stuff get blown up in slow motion. Shameless plug.
Do it.
And I've been Bright Until I Fly. All the links should be in the description below. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Hopefully see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Zoe, for coming on.
Bye.